Hello and welcome to the July 29th World Watercolor Month prompt. This is the drawing that I have done for this prompt, which is Submerge. We're going to paint this beautiful koi fish. And I decided to do the drawing ahead of time because it's a little complex. And so if you want to take a screenshot, you can print that out and then trace it onto your paper. That would be great. I'm going to put us on pause while I get my paper taped down and we can start painting. Okay, we are going to start with a fish and then work on our background. And you know what? I say koi fish, he might be a goldfish. I'm not sure. I don't know the difference between the two. So there might be some fish people out there who know. I don't know. What I love about this as a subject is that his fins are just so beautiful, and watercolor can capture that movement, and there's some, and like the ombre effect of colors fading into each other. So we're going to paint our little guy orange, and then his fins go to like a pinky purpley color into like a blue, and then a really light bright blue. And then after we finish him, we'll do our background. So the color that we're going to start with is an orange, but we're going to mix it instead of just picking an orange right out of our palette. So these are the colors that I have in my palette that I'm going to use today. Most of these are either Daniel Smith or Rembrandt paints. And so we're going to start with Quin Rose, which is a Daniel Smith color. And then we're going to mix in, to get our beautiful orange, this like warmer azo yellow medium. We're going to use these two. We're probably, maybe we're going to use Quin Gold. I don't know. Let's test it out. So let's see. When I'm not sure about two colors, what I like to do is grab a swatch card. So I'm going to grab a swatch card. We're going to test out those two mixes and see what we want to start with for our base. And the reason that I'm not just going to pull from an orange, a straight orange, is because if we're using two colors to mix, we can just do some more interesting things on the page. And then we can use that. And because these fins go into like a really cool pinkish color, if we start with a pink, then the blends are just going to happen more naturally. And so that's why we're not just pulling orange and then pink and blue and, you know, independent colors for each part of the fish, why we're going to mix and start with kind of a base. But the thing that I'm not sure on is what the yellow is that I want to start with, because we could start with Quin Gold, or we could start with yellow azo medium. We could even start with this color, which is Cadmium Yellow Deep. So we could do either one. Maybe we'll try all three. So I'm going to grab my swatch card, which is just, here we go. Sorry, had to find one. I keep these kind of close to my table. It's just a piece of scrap paper, so when I'm cutting things down, if I have an extra square, this is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to move this to the side to make sure that I don't get paint on it. And so I really want to try three different yellowy colors, right? I want to try my Quin Gold, which is very vivid kind of goldish color, which might be perfect because we're painting this goldfish, right? So we want to try this as our base color. We want to try Yellow Azo Deep, which I use all the time. Mine's a little dirty right now because I use this to mix up my greens. So I'm going to get rid of the top here. If your paints are ever really dirty and you want to just clean them up, just brush off the top. I'm going to put it into the part of my well that I use to mix my greens, because that way it's not going to waste, right? We don't like to waste things, but it cleans up my paint so that I can pull this out. Now I'm going to just see. Okay, so now you can see this is my Yellow Azo Medium, which is a brighter yellow. This is, you know, this kind of beautiful gold color. And then, of course, the other option, which also has a little green mixed into it, my Cad Yellow Deep, I use a lot to mix in greens as well. It makes a great kind of olivey green because it's got more red undertones to it. It's a warmer yellow, and so if you want to mix up a green that has a bit more olivey to it, because it is a little more neutralized, so that's why I like to have that on my palette. Okay, so all three very different yellows. Let's see what they look like when we mix in our Quin Rose. So this is my Quin Gold, or I'm sorry, Quin Rose. Okay, so I get this. Oh, that's really pretty. That's Quin Gold and Quin Rose. That's actually really pretty, and it sort of granulates, which would be really cool with a fish. So I'm looking at that too. I'm looking at like, really how does it lay down on the paper. Now let's try a little bit of our quinacridone rose with our azo yellow medium. Okay, that fades out. Oh, it's got a really pretty orange. Ooh, this is going to be really hard to choose. Also slightly granulating, but not quite as much as here. When I say granulating, it means that the pigments kind of separate and sit down into the texture of the paper, so you see a little bit of texture. Okay, and then the final is going to be this. I'm going to just pull a little more out. This Cad Yellow Deep. I'm going to pull in a little bit of my quinacridone rose. Oops. Okay, what's not going to be a fair comparison here is if I have it stronger. All right, there we go. And there we go. Oh, that's really pretty too. I think that's the winner. Okay, and here's why. I'm getting the most texture with this, and I think because both colors are fairly strong, like I can mix in a much stronger, but they're going to hold their own, right? So if I want to go more intense, each color is going to, one isn't going to overtake the other. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I'm going to be able to get a nice wide variety of colors out of this. And even more pink. Oops, more pink if I want to. Okay, so if I want to go more pink. Yep, that's it. That's the winner. Okay, so we are going to use Cadmium Yellow Deep and Quinacridone Rose. Cadmium paints are, I think, listed as, they're not non-toxic. They are toxic. They can be toxic. So I have this in my palette. It's an older paint tube. I do like to paint with it, but I will probably replace it with something that is non-toxic when I need to. I do use it. I'm just careful with it. Like, I'm definitely not going to lick my brush. I don't lick my brushes anyway, but but if I was going to lick my brush, it wouldn't be with the Cadmium Yellow Medium. Cad Yellow Deep, or any Cad Yellow. Okay. Enough of the chit chat. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to go light and build up layers, sort of. Let's start with a really soft, pretty, let's start with a really soft, pretty orangey pink. I want a little pink in here. I don't want to start just with that yellow, but I'm going to kind of dilute it. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and we're just going to go over, I'm not going to go over the whole thing. I do need to lighten my lines, because if I keep these lines so dark, one day I'm going to learn how to edit videos so that you don't have to listen to me fumble. But for right now, while I'm trying to film a video a day for this World Watercolor Month, I just don't even have time. But I think that I'm going to, since this is almost done, I'm really excited to start the next part of this channel, and then I will be able to edit some things, and I think that's going to be probably much nicer for you guys. So if you're sticking with me, I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to paint in his whole self, even over his eye, because we can add a glistening part of his eye back in, and I'm going to paint the first parts of his fins. Now it's the end part of his fins that sort of fade into the background a little bit more, so I don't want to paint those. I'm going to just paint kind of the first, there's almost like a, I don't want to say first round, but the first part of his fins are more orange, and then they go into a some other colors. So we're just going to get kind of that. He's got some, oh, it's so pretty. His fins are so pretty. Okay, and I think that's it. Like this is part of his part of this tail fin. I'm going to leave a tiny little sliver, like a little section right here where they're not connected, just to give a little definition. He's got some like glinty, shimmery scales, and so we're going to just let that be. Okay, so then the next thing is I'm going to put a little more pink in here, and I'm going to mix in, I'm going to like, that's a little too much. No, that's okay, actually. And I'm going to just kind of come here to define some of his body. So what I'm doing right now is called charging. So the paper is wet, and it's accepting this paint really well, and so I'm just going to go in where the fish has some darker aspects to his body, and I'm just going to charge in some paint. And so we're just going to kind of go like this. There is something called a lateral line on fish that kind of runs through the middle, and you can usually see that. There's like it's not distinguished, but you can, and so like I kind of want to emulate that right here by charging in some color on the top and on the bottom. And then this part is a little bit in shadow, so we're going to add a little more color there. I'm going to pull here around his gills, and then he's a little shadowed underneath of here. The light source is coming up from this way. Okay, and now the other place that we're going to dip in some pink is in this part of his fins. I'm just going to keep this paint really kind of light and easy, and if it starts to dry up, like right now I'm starting to feel like it's drying up a little, I can always go back in and soften with more water, right? But not too much. When you do that, you have to be careful so that you don't add so much water to your paper that you get blooms. Unless that's, like sometimes you're looking for blooms, but in this case we aren't, so we're going to be careful to avoid them. Now down here, his fins get pinker. And this is more orangey, and I'm leaving little bits of space, right? So he gets a lot pinker here, so I don't have as much orange underneath of here. Now I'm painting on paper where I wasn't painting before, and so I'm just kind of bringing it down, bringing that pink in along some lines, and I've got some, if you looked at the original drawing, we had some kind of dividing lines between where fins started and stopped. I'm actually not super concerned about getting this exactly because, you know, I don't need it to be exactly like the reference picture or a reference picture. I don't have a singular reference picture with this. I just need it to be, you know, just kind of soft, and I'm just trying to give the illusion of what this fish would look like, right? I don't think that makes sense. Not illusion, but I'm not worried about following a reference photo exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, and now I'm just going to kind of soften up what I've got here. Okay, so, ooh, he's so pretty. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is let this, we're not going to let it dry. Okay, so now the edges of his fins go from this like pinkish color to this like really soft blue. It's really pretty, and kind of purpley in between before then. So I'm going to take my pink that I have mixed here, which still has a little bit of that cad yellow deep, and I'm going to pull in a little bit of my permanent blue violet, just a little bit. This is a Rembrandt color. I really, really love it. Because I want to just add, you see how that's adding a really nice, I want to make the transition. I don't want to go right from pink to blue. So I'm going to come now here where this is like, and we're just going to kind of pull in, because this is where it's a little darker, and I'm just being very, I want to say artsy, but kind of artsy about where I'm putting it, right? Kind of along some of the edges where I have these fins already painted out. There's like here. I'm just kind of dabbing it in. Oops. My dogs must hear something. Just kind of dabbing it in to places where I want to accentuate these fins just really moving around, right? And so your placement doesn't need to be the same as mine. Just this is a relaxing part of the paint. Now the blue is, I'm going to pull cerulean because I'm so up in the air. Okay, wait. It is very much a cerulean blue, but the cerulean I have is an inexpensive cerulean, and so it's a little more opaque than I want. So I think I'm going to pull Colbalt, which is not quite as green as a cerulean, but I think that's going to be a better option, just given what's on my palette. And then if I want to give it a little more turquoisey, because it is a little more turquoise, I'm going to throw a little bit of that cad yellow in there. Ooh, that's kind of muddy. That's okay. You see, I'm keeping it super light. It's very, very diluted. All right, and now we're just going to go in like this, and we're just going to dip the last part of his fins, or hers. I don't know if this is a male or female. And I'm truly just coming along and dotting along in the direction of that original drawing. I'm not even looking at a reference photo. I'm just pulling in color where I think it'd be pretty to pull it in. Okay, that's it. That's going to be, I'm going to soften this up a little bit in a few spots. because I want it to flow together. And I might bring in my cad yellow in a few spots. Let's see. Down here. I feel like I need to. I'm just going to kind of come in. This is kind of, yep, we're going to make this a little stronger. I don't want to get mud though, so I'm being a little careful not to get mud. Okay, and I'm gonna make sure this flows together better. And I'm gonna go a little outside. I just want to bring that a little softer. Same thing here. Okay. Ooh, I'm really happy. That's looking nice. Now there's a bit of a shadow right here, and I'm going to use the blue color in order to create that. This part of the painting's pretty dry, so it comes right from behind this gill, and it just comes like this, right? And it's like where his body is that starts and stops. Actually, let me pull. There's almost like a starts and stops. This is a little darker that I want right here, and then so it's kind of like this, and then a little bit back here where because he's got this really round belly. And I'm going to take a little bit of that permanent blue violet with the Quin, and it's just making kind of a dark mix. I've got a little bit of the Cad Yellow Deep, a little bit of the quinacridone rose, and a little bit of the permanent blue violet here. And I'm going to take and dot right along this bottom part. I'm going to charge in that color, and same thing here. That just gives it a bit more interest, and then we're going to take this similar color, and we've got these gills. We're just going to sort of establish the kind of corners of those. So we're just taking our brush and we're just kind of giving it a little bit of almost like a V shape, and then this one's kind of like a curved L shape, and then here under his eye, and he's got this little pouty mouth, which I just love. And it's a little pinkish around that spot. So I'm going to add a little more pink right in here. Actually, yes. It kind of comes up and connects with just really playing with the color here. I'm going to kind of dot this out. This got a little stronger than I wanted. So if it gets a little stronger, you can just take your paper towel and you can dot it out to pull some of that out. The other thing is that I want to take the same kind of, it's a little muddy, but it's perfect for what we're doing because we're developing a little bit of shadow. And he's got kind of a line that comes in from the back of his head, and it kind of comes down to his tail like that. And I skipped a spot right here because, there we go. We're just going to kind of blend that out with water a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to let this dry. And then we're going to come back and do our deeper values. So we have our light tones and our mid tones. Now we're going to add some depth to his fins at some of the edges, and just to kind of define that he's got these fins that are kind of weaving and waving over each other. So let's put it on pause. We're going to let it dry, and then we'll put in his eye as well. Like I said, this was going to be a pretty quick paint. You know what I am going to do? I don't like how, before I do that, before I put it on pause, I'm just kind of looking at my overall drawing, and what I don't love is that this is kind of a hard line right here, and it shouldn't be. So I'm just going to soften that up a little bit. You can always, oh, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of work to soften it. I'm a little harsh right here. You can just see this kind of line between this blue and pink, and it's just more than I want. So I'm going to kind of brush, I'm kind of scrubbing at my paper a little to lighten that up a bit. And if I dab with my paper towel, and then I'm going to go back in, I'm just working it a little bit. Now I have 100% cotton paper here, so that means that I can do these kinds of things without wrecking my paper. If you're working on cellulose paper, sometimes it's better to leave something that you don't love, like I don't love it. Sometimes it's better to leave it how it is rather than try to go back in and work it like that, because that cellulose paper is less forgiving. That's why it's really nice to paint on. If you can manage to paint on 100% watercolor or cotton, 100% cotton paper, you will find that you have different results than if you're painting on cellulose paper. Okay, we'll let him dry, and then we're going to come back in and do our next layer. But I think we've got a really good start here. Okay, the paper is dry. It's not, I would say that like 20 minutes in is fine. It doesn't have to be bone dry because we're gonna work some more paint in here, but you want it to be mostly dry. So if your paper's still buckling a little, you still have some moisture, you maybe wanna put it on pause and wait just a bit before we come back in. All right, so I have switched over to my size 4 pointed round. Our first washes tend to be done with a bigger brush because it helps us stay loose and just swash in that color. And then we move to a smaller brush when we're doing the detail work. And so we're gonna start that detail work. I'm pretty happy with his body. I am going to add just a little bit more of that permanent blue violet to my pile that I've been working with. And I'm going to work that in to a few spots, like right in here. I'm going to define that the gills a little bit more, and I'm going to kind of at the bottom of his eye and a little bit at the top. Okay, and I'm going to come in as well. His mouth is actually kind of pinkish purple, so I'm going to add a little bit of my Quin rose in with that permanent blue violet, and I'm going to just make his lips. He's got like a little frown. There we go. Okay. I'm going to leave the rest of his body alone because I think it's really pretty. It's got some dimension, and I want our biggest focus to be on our fins. This top fin has like kind of a streak of pink. I'm going to mix a bit of cad yellow in with my Quin rose, and I'm going to make this more intense than I was using before because now we're coming in and we're just developing those deeper colors, brighter hues or darker hues. It's going to be either or, and some depending on where we're working. And so I'm just going to pull up right here. And then I want to soften it on both sides. So I'm going to rinse my brush with water and I'm just going to soften. Now I want to do the same thing, but I'm going to put a little more pink in here. So I want it to be a little more pink, a little less orange. Although I'm still letting the orange mix into there. And we're just going to come in, and he's kind of folds over here. And we're just going to let that be soft. And you see how we've got a few little lines? So at the bottom, it's mostly joined together because there's more shadow there. And to create a little more shadow illusion while this is still wet, I'm going to charge in a very tiny amount of purple down in here, just to let it kind of give that sense of depth, right? And then we've got now, if you look at a photo of a goldfish, you're going to see all these individual little lines. We're not going to paint all of those because that's going to make our painting too busy. So I'm just going to do a few. So I just pulled out a few little lines to give it some, give it that, like that notion that we've got these little individual kind of, I don't know what would it be called. They're not seams, but I sew as well. So it's almost like a seam to me. It looks like a seam. I know that's not the right term, but I don't know much about these guys. Okay, so now I'm going to mix back in a bit more of my Cad Yellow Deep into this pink, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to develop some depth. So I had some lines drawn in on my original drawing where the fins were kind of folding over. So I'm going to come into that. I'm going to add a little water so that I'm a little more diluted. And I'm just going to pull that in, pull that out. Okay, and see how we're just developing a little bit of depth here? And I'm going to do the same thing with a bit more of a purpley color right here because we've got kind of a, it was kind of like, it's kind of like waving. And now I'm going to take that purple color and I'm just going to let that charge into here. And again, I'm going to pull it out a few times just so we get that illusion. The fin is going this way. So we're going to pull out that illusion just a few times. Okay? All right, and now he kind of pulls up this way, and so we're going to leave that a bit more pink. I'm just kind of going back and forth between my pink, my orange, and my purple here, and they're all mixing in together, so they have, it's going to have a nice cohesive look because they're all flooding into each other, so they're not going to look separated, right? If that makes sense. Okay, so now from here we kind of come down like this and down, and I'm just letting that. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the orange in. We're just going to flood that in, And but I want to make sure, like, I've got some really cool things going on underneath of here that I don't want to paint over the top of too much. Okay, we're going to get a bit more purple and orange. And so the tail part of this fin is actually darker than the front, and it's a little more pink and blue. So I'm just kind of dabbing in that direction, leaving some spaces in between in order to create this really soft look. Now this is really light and really pretty, and the way that I accentuate a light pretty part is by putting this in shadow. I'm going to mix all three of my colors together to kind of gray it out. I might even pick up a little bit of that blue, and we're just going to paint right in here because we want to really accentuate that we've got this like really light soft bits coming off here. All right, and then I'm going to lighten that up. Add a little bit more water, so now I'm pretty diluted, and I'm going to come in like this and just kind of swoop along, right? Just giving this line. We're just showing that we've got this really pretty line going. I'm not looking at a photo right now. We're just kind of looking at the shapes that we have on this goldfish and where we can add a lot of interest and depth. I feel like one thing I want to do is right here. There's kind of like a nice shadow there. I'm even going to pull in a little bit of blue for this. Oops. Might need to rehydrate my paints. There we go. If they start to dry, sometimes you gotta go back in and rehydrate. Okay, so like right here, I just want there to be a little bit of blue. Ooh, yeah. Oh, I love it. Doesn't it look like it's just flowing in and out? That's what we're aiming for. Okay, so so this is where building up the color around the spots that we want to be lightest helps to accentuate that that's light. I really want this right here to be nice and light. So I'm going to bring in a bit more intense color right here. I'm just kind of dotting it, right? All right, and now I'm not gonna add any more. I might soften this edge out a bit. We're just playing with it. This is where you get to just experiment. And if it doesn't turn out, you put the shape down on the paper again and you experiment some more. And there's so much learning that happens in that. Each piece, just consider a practice piece, and sometimes by the time you're done, you're like, ooh, that's exactly what I was thinking, and you're very excited. And sometimes you finish and you're like, ooh, that's not really what I was planning. So you push it to the side and you try again until you get the results that you had hoped for. All right, I'm coming in with a mix of this pinky purple, which is almost kind of magenta-y, because this side fin is going past, so I'm making sure it's going past this fin. There's like this fin that's coming off the bottom of him. So I'm going to what I'm doing is I'm adding definition of that. And I'm adding definition by negative painting around this fin, right? And so I'm adding in that beautiful pink. I'm letting it kind of trail here and be a little ragged. I'm going to pull up a little bit of this beautiful blue. I don't want too much, so I'm going to rinse it off my brush, and I'm going to get just a teeny bit on the tip. And I'm going to charge in some blue under here just to I want to make sure that you can see, oh, this is receding, and the other things that are here are in front. And then we're just going to kind of pull. And then what happens is it gets lighter right here. And we're just going to kind of see how we're just defining. And now by negative painting around this little space, and I kind of let my brush determine the path. I didn't even really pick it myself. We're making it so that it just looks like it's flowing in and out. Isn't that so cool? That's what's so fun about this painting. And I'm going to add a little more blue in here. And then let's add a bit of pink right here, but I don't want to overdo it. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it alone because I definitely don't want to overdo it. I really like what we've got going on here. I can see that this is where I do want to make a correction, right? I can see that this needs to push out a little bit. Because these two lines, we've got this fin coming here. Those two lines weren't meeting up. This one was sitting too far to the right. That's something that your eye will look at and you're like, oh, something's not quite right. Because if one object is sitting behind the other, those lines of this object should be nice and smooth, one smooth line right? So sometimes you got to push one out or the other out to make them meet. And so it wasn't, and now it does. Happier with that. Okay, and so this is kind of the bottom of the fish, and it's kind of bright, but I don't want it to be too bright. I think I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm just gonna come in and do just a little bit of like pushing in, but not too much. There we go. Okay, I want to leave that on the lighter side. Actually, and that's maybe a little more than I wanted, so I'm just going to come in with my paper towel and just pull some of that up. There we go. Okay, oops. And let's push a little bit of this more blue in here. Okay. Oh, I'm really happy with that. That looks so nice. And when you paint these very organic subjects, you get to do this. You get to just have a lot of fun, and you don't have to worry about anything exact, because every fish, every creature is unique and different, and so you're just painting that. I don't like the way that this has come in here. I think it's too hard. So I'm going to add a little bit of pink in there, and just, not maybe that much. Let's add a little bit of our Cad Yellow Deep in there to make that a little more peachy, like a peachy pink. There we go. And I'm just going to come in, because I feel like it looks kind of blocky here. So I'm just going to come in with that pink, and I'm just going to soften that, or not soften it, but just kind of, yeah, push that in so that it's not quite so, it was looking like out of place, right? And then I'm going to join it together by adding a little blue here. Okay. Oops. I'm going to soften that side a little. Okay. Now, the last part we're going to deal with is this in here. And so the background of this is actually really, really soft. It's like this really thin part of the fin, and it's hard to see, but there's a little more strength and kind of pink to right here. And so this is going to let me kind of, because somehow I kind of looks disjointed here, and I don't want it to. So I'm going to go like that. I'm going to add a little bit of blue that goes all the way to the back here. But not too much. Maybe a little bit here, because this is where it might be a little in shadow. Okay, I don't want to mess that up, and I feel like I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. I want to add a bit more, right down in here. It just needs a bit more definition right here. I had charged in a little color, but I feel like it needs a little more, so I'm just going to come in and add a little more here and here with that blue. And then I also want to add a little bit more blue in here and in here. And he's got almost like a purpley blue. Let's see, let's add he, she. I feel like this is a little washed out looking, so let's just add a bit of, too much. Okay, when we get too much, we're not going to panic. We're just going to add a little water and a little paper towel. There we go. Oh, and that's perfect. Then you end up with just the right amount. Okay, I think we're going to be done with that part. Now let's paint the eye. And so I'm gonna use blue. I don't know what color fish's eyes are, but we're gonna use this blue purple color on the outside right here. Now we're gonna need to let that dry. And I don't want to go in with a super deep black, because everything's so soft, it would be so out of place. So instead, we're going to let that dry. If I put something else in, it's going to flood. And then we're going to go in and add a darker, we're going to mix up some of our permanent violet and our blue to get a deeper color, and maybe a little bit of that Cad Yellow Deep to get kind of a dark gray, and we're going to just kind of fill in that inner circle a bit. But we want to let it dry first. So while we're letting it dry, I think this is the perfect picture to make, well, let's see, do we want to do, I don't leave my backgrounds white very often. I almost always have an actual background. And so I'm trying to think about, yep, we are. We're going to do a background. We're going to do kind of a gray background. So how we're going to get the gray is we're going to add our Cobalt blue, because that's what we used in the blue of the fish. And we're going to add our quinacridone pink. So to remember to make gray, you're mixing the 3 primaries, and we have our version of our 3 primaries here between our Cad Yellow Deep. Okay, that's very green. Actually, do we kind of like that? I kind of like that. I wasn't planning on it. All right, yep, that's what we're gonna do. Now, I'm not mixing this all the way. I'm gonna have some parts that are a little more green, some parts that are a little more pink, some parts a little more purple, some parts that are even a little more blue. And that's how we are gonna paint in around him. And I'm just going to, I'm not going to paint all the way to the edge of the paper, I don't think. I'm gonna let myself just kind of, now I'm just gonna use some water. I'm going to pull this, like some of this is a little bit, I'm going to not touch, I'm going to let it, I might touch in some spots. We might paint over some spots. I don't know. Yeah, we will. Okay, see how like here I've left a little outline? I'm going to leave that. But over here by the fins, I'm painting right up over the top. Now my fins are pretty dry, so I can do that. I'm going to add a little more of my Cad Yellow Deep just to get a bit more yellowy green. I kind of like that. It's going to come off here. I'm keeping kind of the same, just letting it dance. If it gets a little too wet and I feel like I'm going to buckle or I'm going to make a mess, I can always go in and soak a little bit of that up. I was a little wet there. And I want to have a little bit of pink, a little more pink in here. I don't really have any pink. We're going to maybe pull it down in the bottom here. Oh, I'm really happy with that. Okay. So do you see how it's like such an easy little background to make? And by letting the background kind of flow into where the edges of the fins are, it makes the fish very much a part of the background, but at the same time we've left this little bit of white around the front of him. We didn't join the background with the fish here and down in here, and what that does is it accentuates, and so we've got just a really nice composition. I'm super, super happy with that. And using the colors, we limited our palette. We didn't use every color in our palette. We really just used Permanent Blue Violet, Quin Aquadome Pink, Cad Yellow Deep, and Cobalt Blue. So we used 4 colors for the painting. And then when we did the background, we didn't use the purple because we didn't need to. This was just used to create some extra value. We used the 3 primaries that were the piece was painted with, and now that background melds in so beautifully with the rest of the piece. And I do that all the time. If I'm painting an object, not like a landscape, I like to use the colors that I've used in my palette into the background, and that way it doesn't stand out, you know, or like stand out in a bad way, right? What I mean by stand out is it doesn't contradict the rest of the painting. It's very easy, you know, it flows nicely. Okay, so my little eye, he is dry, so in order to just give it a little bit darker tone, now I'm going to pull in this Permanent Blue Violet because that's going to help me get a nice deep tone. And you could just like grab your gray, but it's not going to look as nice. We've got this beautifully limited palette and we continue that on, then we're just going to have a really nice finished piece. I limit my palette in almost everything I do. Alright, and we're using our primaries in order to get a beautiful gray. There we go. Oh, that's it. It's like kind of gray with a little bit of purple undertones. And so we're just going to pull in, and I'm just going to paint in around the bottom of that circle. And I'm going to leave the center and the top unpainted. And that makes it kind of glimmer. And I'm going to give a little highlight. I'm going to look at it. Do I need anything to be darker in the fins? I kind of feel like I'm getting a little lost here. And so it might be nice to pull some of my blue in with a bit of pink. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. Maybe a little. I'm going to muddy that up just a bit though. And I'm just going to come in. I feel like we need a little something in here. Just want to make sure there's enough contrast. One thing that happens a lot when you're new to watercolor is you don't build in enough contrast to things because you're worried about wrecking the piece by making the color too dark. And then in turn, instead, your piece is kind of washed out. And I think we're going to do that too, like my goldfish. I love his coloring, except I think he's a little washed out in some places. So I'm going to take my Cad Yellow Deep because we definitely want him to be a goldfish, right? He is we want him to look like a goldfish. And I'm gonna just come over the top of some of this. And this is gonna feel really bright, but that's okay. And I'm gonna come over some of the top of this. I'm not gonna do the whole fish by any means, but I'm just coming in and I'm just kind of deciding where I'm gonna pull that bright to remind us, because we've got all these colors, and I love all these colors, but we want to make sure that he still looks like a goldfish. I'm going to streak this out. Oh my gosh, I'm really happy I did that. And this is one of those things, like when you make the decision to do that and you like your piece and then you're like, oh, I'm just going to slap some more paint on here. Sometimes it doesn't go well, and sometimes it goes really well. And so this is that experiment, and so we're going to do the same here. We're just going to make sure that we give him some vibrancy, because we were kind of losing that. And I'm going to give a little more pink to here. Now I got to be careful not to touch that eye, because if I touch that eye, oh yeah, really happy with that. Okay. And if I didn't like it, then I could start again later. I can just get another piece of paper. Okay. Oh, I think that really helps.